Today on the Life Science Success Podcast, my guest is Patrick McCarthy. He's an accomplished executive and licensed attorney with over 30 years in healthcare specific experience. He has demonstrated a long track record of leadership and consistent achievement of aggressive goals in startup mode with Fortune 500 companies. McCarthy is an entrepreneur at heart and has an outstanding track record of building successful software as a service based companies and clinical product franchises. Welcome, Patrick.
Hey, good morning, Don. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So can you tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I consider myself a wannabe physician that couldn't get through physics, and therefore have done just about everything else in healthcare. But started in pharma, then to med products, med device, healthcare IT services, and have almost 40 years of experience from sales through marketing, general management, and really, I guess, a healthcare junkie, but love seeing what and how to bring innovation to market where we can improve patients' lives and business processes.
Yeah, a couple things that I had said in the intro, right? So it also says that you're a licensed attorney in your bio. So I was just curious, how did that happen?
Yeah. When I got out of school and I went to work for Procter and Gamble, selling pharmaceuticals back in '86, and quickly realized that while I was really good at delivering sandwiches, there was more to life. And pharma rep job was really rather lucrative. I was working 9 to 1 every day, and if I went to 5, I was surpassing the goals by far, and the team was looking ugly at me. So I thought there had to be something more to that. And I'm an avid tennis player. I played college and after that. So when I would get through playing, I'd go to the tennis club back in Detroit where I lived, and most of my call panel was there. And they treat me one way in the office and then another way on the court. And I thought, I don't like this so much. I chatted with an elderly gentleman that was a great friend, and we were about the only Christian family in the club. And he said, "What would a good Jewish boy do that's afraid of blood?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "He'd go to law school. Go to law school." So, with that, I thought I could be a professional and bring some value in the healthcare forum. And so, ultimately, while I was working for Abbott's hospital products division back in the day, where it was all the IVs and IV pumps and otherwise, where, if you were good enough to make a sale, you got the honor to work all 3 shifts for about a month. I did night school for 4 years and finished it up. And it was promised a role with legal by my division president, which he had no idea that that wasn't happening. But ultimately finished school, licensed in Michigan, moved to Chicago, and continued on. So that was the impetus with it. But it's been really a wonderful thing to have over time with all that I've done a lot of mergers and acquisitions and a lot of contract work. And it just teaches you to think differently. So you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room when you can see things from 4 or 5 different perspectives. That gives you a better understanding of how to interrelate with people and get where they're coming from. So that's been a great blessing for me.
Yeah, and in business, right, it'd be really helpful as well because you probably see the path a lot better than some of us, where you can go, hey, look, I know that we can get from here to there if we just do this, right? Versus a guy like me who has to, I always have to rely on my experience and my interactions with, attorneys to trying to get to that same point. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a risk reward, and when I ever recall along the way, there's a great attorney. His name is John Gaither. He was our corporate counsel when I was at Global Healthcare Exchange along the way. And the best piece of advice John ever gave me was sometimes the best deal is not doing the deal at all.
mhm.
And wait a minute, we have a goal here. And he's like, no, no, no. Goal orientation is one thing, but making sure it's the right deal is really important. So it takes you to a different level of diligence, and you can either see there is a path or there's not a path. And you force critical thinking upon yourself and maybe upon the team. So I laugh though often. I had started the MBA at the same time as the JD, and doing night school, I thought, geez, all I need is 4 more people to get me behind on a project. I can get a C on my own. I'm not doing that. But I'm dropping the MBA portion. And I wish I had continued on, but was really, really fortunate along the way to be able to attend a number of executive management courses. And 2 of them were within Harvard Business School's executive ed, and really focused in my areas, which is disruption or innovation. And was blessed enough to work under Clay Christensen 2 different times, who's the godfather of disruption. He wrote The Innovator's Dilemma and The Innovator's Solution. And as much as I tried to break his model, man, it's true. You can never be a big company without 5 things that have to be there, and 4 out of 5 doesn't cut it. So anyway, constant learner, love reading, love education, but really love the healthcare space and the opportunity we can do.
And not a physics guy. That's the, I mean, for somebody that, I mean, that's where I started, right? That's where I started my education was, on the physics side. And, it's funny because the only thing that prevented me from continuing is, essentially this conversation that I had with one of my mentors that said, look, I mean, the career of a physicist up until you're a PhD physicist is that you will be building stuff for people that are PhDs. So
Yeah.
you can decide how you want the rest of your career to play out. But the reality is, do you want to go work for a bunch of PhDs? Yes or no? And my simple answer at the time was no. But I didn't know one way or the other, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, well, for me with physics, I could teach it, but I couldn't test it. I went twice, and what was interesting is I had to drop the course twice after the first exam. Half the class got above 80, half the class got below 40.
Mm.
Guess what I was in. So tutors and everything. I literally tutored people and they got A's, and I don't know if it was testing pressure or whatever. And I know I'm ADHD and dyslexic, but undiagnosed, but for some doctor friends of mine that I annoy. But so I'm sure it all mixes in there, but followed the path God wrote for me.
Yeah, and I mean that kind of leads us back to your career again. So, I mean, at least as I look at your career, and you've gone from Wright Medical to Cardinal Health to Validcare now as the CEO. What made you at least want to start a company like Validcare?
Yeah. So well, ultimately, I guess around 91, 92, I was introduced into what I call disruptive models. Abbott was the first when we launched the anesthesia business, and we brought inhaled gases to the US. Clinical trials made a big difference there in that sevoflurane, which I think is, the largest inhaled gas now, was looked at as taboo because they were afraid of fluoride levels being elevated and it would hurt people. But took just one extra study to show that there wasn't really any harm. And we brought that to market, and it went. So with that, as I went forward from anesthesia to e-commerce, GHX, and then the Met device was disruptive models to see if we could reduce the cost of care. I was approached as I left Cardinal by a big insurer and a really, really big provider that said, we don't want to talk products anymore. We want you to connect patients to those who care. And I thought, that shouldn't be hard. I'm not a technologist, but I built a lot of global healthcare exchange, and we connected every hospital in the US to every supplier. And with that, immediately saw the opportunity of, wow, if we could take, whether it's care, and we did value-based models there in orthopedics, we ultimately took 130 CPT codes or procedural codes of patients and connected them to their orthopedic or neurosurgeon from the time they signed up through surgery through 90 days post-op, and collected all of their clinical and quantitative measures, which looks very much like a clinical trial. It's just a different use case. It's got to be HIPAA compliant. It's all, CFR part 21, part 11 regulated. We finished that, and it worked so well. My client got bought for 2.3 billion. And I thought, well, that was a short stint. It was actually a 3-year engagement, and we thought there'd be more. But then I stepped back and said, where else can we apply this that isn't going to be so competitive that people won't work with us because they're jockeying for managed care or for value based care up, opportunities. And I looked, and so I'm number 10 of 12 kids and lost a brother when I was 18. He was 20
Wow.
to a rare disease. And, had heart disease and got, some with HIV, and clinical trials have been a thing for my family since I was 18.
Hmm.
I have in one in 2002. My wife's been in two since. And I realized just how manual those processes are. And a number of really good friends here, and I live in the Denver area, but my physician friends that are in clinical trials, they just gripe about the process and the extra systems and too many people. And they're not even the ones sponsoring the program. So I looked and said, well, if we take our platform approach and look back at clinical trials, I think there's an opportunity here to really modernize it. And we call it a CRO 2.0 approach. And it takes me all the way back to when I got out of school and went to work for Procter and Gamble. The first thing they put us through was Deming total quality management training.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
but as a sales guy, I come out, I've got a science degree, biology major, fellow college and management minor, and they want me to go sell something, but they have me building fish bones and Paretos on how I'm going to talk to people. And I'm like, are you people crazy? This is nuts. But P&G took it all the way through.
Hmm.
Years later, Henry Ford Hospital System, as was a client of mine, is implementing TQM all the way through what they did. And I started seeing everything as a process. And so long and short is when I look at the process of clinical trials, it's actually an ecosystem that's interconnected, and where folks get really excited about getting in touch with new, patients due to digital access. It's great. That's just one component. There's all sorts of pain being felt by the investigators, or even connecting lab work or CT results and otherwise. It all needs to be in one place. And like everything in healthcare, it's been duct taped and bailey wired together over time as they made incremental changes. But we had the opportunity to come in from the outside and look fresh at it and say, okay, if this is the process end to end, and we're just going to do it now with all the technology and all the know-how that we have, what does it look like? And so looked at that and said, man, we could save a lot of money, save a lot of time, help people be more consistent in execution, and bring a better overall experience to everybody involved, whether it's the sponsor or the investigator or the patients that are participating. So that's what got me going in there. And since then, with just prior to COVID, my wife had a very rare cancer, and then ended up getting COVID really bad, and both of those caused her to have to participate in clinical trials. Both saved her life. And the whole time I looked at him, I was like, gosh, this is an inefficient process. We could do this so much better. It works, don't get me wrong, but there's a better way to do it than what happened. So anyway, that's really what motivated me. And with that, we had a team of professionals that just appeared out of nowhere that I've known and trusted for a long time, that we were able to build the company on. And even as we've grown, have met additional folks who have 20 and 30 years experience in clinical trials, particularly, that have been able to bring augmentation to our software and our processes to make it all much easier.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that I hoped greatly that as we went through COVID, I mean, as bad as it was, and watching all these people die, with the hope that we would come out with some better medicines really fast, and to have a vaccine as quickly as we did and things like that. The one thing, being a process guy, that I wished for was, hey, maybe we'll learn something that's drastically better, right? That will help us, one, sort of sort through which things should we go after the strongest, and then two, sort of shortening this clinical trial process. And until I've seen what Validcare offers, I mean, I haven't seen anything drastically different in this space, like what you guys are offering.
No, well, thanks. Well, and to your point, as we went through the COVID storm, as I call it, we had Operation Warp Speed, and all of a sudden everything can move fast. And whether that was a success or not, to me, having sat in the chair of large bureaucratic companies before and seeing the company inertia slow everything down and hey, this is the way we do it. This is healthcare. We don't do it that way. There's that the question of, well, why don't you do it differently doesn't come up. This forced well, what's possible conversation, right?
Right.
And I think it brought clinical trials to the forefront to say, well, this is part of a pharma or biotech or med devices brand, and you can get known. But if I'm sitting in the chair of a CEO in any of those types of institutions, my mindset's a little different now because I've seen the way it can happen. And, we threw the force of nature behind what's right. But if you look and say, hey, wait a minute, this is all a process. There's a beginning, there's an end, there's lots of stuff that has to happen in between. What can we do to optimize that? That's really all we did coming in from the outside. But that was taboo prior to COVID. You're not allowed to ask those questions. It's like, wait a minute, those are scientists, and you can't rush academia, and you can't rush this and that. Well, actually, you can, and every other part of the business for running a P&L has goals and timelines and resources that are pretty fixed. And if you don't hit those, usually you're not in your chair the next 6 months.
Right.
And so it brought the opportunity, I think, for the C-suite, especially the CEO and CFO, to say, what should I be measuring in order to look and see what is a good clinical trial process and what should I expect so I can reliably predict this? Because I have fixed resources in terms of cash, people. I've made promises to the board or my investors. And when I miss, that's a bad day for me. If I'm venture capital backed or PE backed, that means I've got to go ask for more cash. And if you've ever worked as an executive in venture or private equity, you quickly learn what the word chattel means. While you are compensated well with a promise to do even better, there's a big squeeze on you. So you're volunteering for more squeeze and potentially dilution of your interest on a personal level, as well as maybe, lose the job. But on a company level, it could mean you're shuttering the doors for every day that you're late. And so, um, I love the fact that COVID's woken the industry up and that folks are looking at this as a performance art now, or a performance discipline within the company, not just regulated and precise and all the science and the safety and the efficacy and the adverse events all still mean everything. And but getting to database lock on time and on budget's a big deal. And so
Yeah.
that should be the goal. So I think too often now the industry's focused on just let's engage more in different patients and diverse patients and otherwise, which is all it's really virtuous things to do and they can be done. But moreover, let's look at the macro goals first. Can we do this? And if we can, what's it going to take to finish on time and on budget? Diversity, as well as, whether it's geographic or demographically, all of those are lesser included things that have to be planned for. But the planning becomes really, really important. And if you plan it from a process perspective, be surprised just how much more efficiency there is there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. The next question I have for you is so when customers come to Validcare, um, where are they at overall in the clinical development phase? Where do they start with you, and where do they, where do they typically end?
Yeah, so most are typically about to get approved for a phase 2 or a pivotal trial, or they're somewhere in phase 1 and they're planning for it. Or the third is it's a rescue in that they're stuck. They've been running something for a long time and they just can't get to the end zone. And typically that is recruitment issues or not the right sites that they picked. And the sites are over promising and under delivering, which it just happens. So, but those would be the three areas. But then you've got really three different flavors of types of customers. You have those that need a full-fledged CRO and say, hey, I'm going to give you the keys, drive the car and just go and do this for me. And then tell me where we are. The second is I'm so fed up with CROs. I don't want a CRO, but I need the process and the infrastructure to run it myself with my team. And I might need a little bit of things here. And and then the third would really be in that rescue phase is, wow, I need to figure out how to manage the old and manage the new. Can you help me really bifurcate my process, manage all my old data in one place, and then fix this thing and take me to the end zone and merge the two? So three very different customer types, and then within that, you really have it bifurcated. Many, once they get done with the phase two, they've already done a licensing deal with someone where they're going to get picked off. So that's really those that are concentrated just on the cash burn, and they're trying not to run out of money and go out of business. Uh, the other is, hey, we're going to take this past phase two and we're actually going to go to market launch. So there you've got cash burn plus revenue opportunity. And so when we engage at the executive level, it's, it starts with the business decision. And well, what are we trying to achieve? We're trying to get here while we still have money in our pocket, or we're trying to get here by this time so we can put more money in our pocket, or God help me and save the company because we're in such a train wreck, and there's a pile of dog poop in the corner that we've tried really hard, but we just need help. So that's really the kinds of folks that we engage, and it's pharma, biotech, med device, and even nutraceutical.
Wow. And so it really across a lot of different industries, just overall. And it sounds to me like you could even get involved in phase one clinical trials all the way through, to, let's say phase three, clinical trials as well.
Yeah, could go 1 through 4. Optimally, 2 through 4 is great, and or real world evidence, post market trials is a terrific fit for us. Um, Ultimately, a large component of what we do is our software platform. We call it a platform as a service, where everybody that's involved plugs into one cloud based platform. So basically unify the data in one cloud to whatever extent we can, and pull other data sets in versus having a decentralized platform for patients and then using system based for the investigators. Um, as soon as you get into those disparate data sets, which is typical in healthcare, now you're mapping data all the time. And for us, we can do direct data capture from all different angles, including, we've got LabCorp and Quest, for example, if they're standard lab results, we have pipes from them into us where it's not real time, but it's near real time. And similarly with CTs and imaging, with Azure hooks, we can get to any imaging device. And we just key everything off the same patient identifier. And then the investigator and or sponsor has access to the data in really close to near time. So it saves, gosh, about 30% of time in running a trial just on the reduction in data manipulation and data management, let alone the people and resources doing it the traditional way. But, this goes back to if that's the way we do it and you don't ask the question, why do we do it? Or why don't we do it another way? It, yeah, you are where you are, and that's okay. Great opportunity for us.
Yeah, and recently, Validcare hosted a couple of different webinars. What was the focus of the webinars that you've had?
Yeah, so we've done two so far. The first was really to demonstrate the power of using the platform from a digital perspective. It was a ridiculous study that most would never choose to do. We had 17 cohorts, so 17 different product companies, all run a liver safety study at the same time via COVID across the entire United States, and did it completely virtually. So, and from a definitional perspective, decentralized for the Decentralized Clinical Trials Association means you're allowing patients to participate outside the clinical environment. So we did that, but we also had two principal investigators or co-investigators. One was in Boca Raton, Florida. The other was in Buffalo, New York. And they too were decentralized. And so we were able to run this and touch people in all 50 states over a little over an 18-month time frame, where from recruitment to e-consent to capturing data from patients, including adverse events and medical history, as well as all the patient-reported outcomes, clinical measures, and the investigator inputs and outputs. Everything was done on the platform, and what was remarkable is we did it on a fixed cost, and during COVID, fixed cost, 17 companies, um, and actually hit the time marks as well. And we did take an interim assessment about 2/3 of the way in, shared the data with FDA. Again, done not not being a student of history in terms of having the experience in research before, we didn't realize interim assessments take months. We closed the database on a Tuesday, and we were able to give the analysis to the FDA on a Friday to
Mm.
figure out where we were. And they asked for us to tweak a couple of things in the protocol. We took that back to IRB, sent it through, and within 48 hours, we were able to reconsent everybody. And this was over 1,100 people in a study. And they were able to do everything via their phone. The physicians were able to do everything via a tablet. And we still finished on time and got the data to FDA so they can call a ball. So it was, so when we look at clients and they say, but, can you handle this or that? I was like, have you ever seen a 17-sided Rubik's Cube? We can know? And and what was remarkable is we did it with about 70% less staffing than is traditional. So, it's not nirvana, but boy, it's a heck of a lot easier than traditional. And it's just nice. We had goals and we hit them. So that was webinar number one, to help folks understand what's possible kind of in a worst case scenario. Number two was we had our medical director, Dr. Bob Kaufman, and one of our principal investigators who's worked with us on a couple of different studies, Keith Aqua, speak from their perspective. Cause I don't know, I'm an old guy and I used to buy companies like me in the past, and everybody can tell you what their technology does or what this does or what that does. And to me, I don't want to talk about me until we've taken care of somebody and I can tell you, yeah, we've done that. And it's better that I'm not the one speaking. It's always better that a client is speaking or somebody that's used the system speaking. And so, each of those gentlemen have 300 clinical trials under their belt. And it really changed the way that they look at clinical trials. They've seen they can do more with less staff. They have less oversight. They're not bothered by CRAs being in their office doing all sorts of stuff. And there's really very, very little mistakes for data issues, because everything is, well, we take an approach where everything is structured data unless it really can't be structured. So you may put in a wrong score on pain, put in a 7 instead of a 5, and okay, that's correctable. But you're not going to say, well, kinda, right? Or you put in a wrong measure. And that really goes a long way, where everything's instantly redactable, and it just keeps errors down and makes life a lot easier. So the two of them were able to speak to their experiences and juxtapose it to the history. Our next is coming up later in September. We haven't announced yet, but we're looking at real world evidence, and we'll have Ken Altman with real world regulatory speaking, and how the platform can be used there. So it's yeah, it's nice. I always love when I don't have to do this and talk. I'm not things. But well, it's great to know that we're making progress for them and positively impacting things.
Yeah, it took some arm twisting on my side to try and get you on the podcast, I know. So getting you getting you here was a major accomplishment on my side. So so there are three questions I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
Well, what really inspires me is the opportunity to make a positive impact on human health. Like I said, physics took me out of being a physician. Still really want to be one. Maybe someday I get something other than a Juris Doctorate, but but really to have the ability to touch someone's life in a positive way makes a big difference. I go back early in my career at Abbott, and we had this really cool IV pump that took 4 lines in and 1 line out, and each line was programmable. And um, back in Detroit, I was on the bone marrow transplant unit, and there's a little boy who had been in his bed with 14 different IV pumps attached to him, and he couldn't get out of bed for days. And we came in and we hooked up 4 of these pumps to him on one IV pole, and he was able to get in his big wheel,
Mm,
and he was ride up and down the unit. And now I was a 28, 29-year-old young professional at the time. I found myself sobbing the hallway
hmm
and thought, wow. And he gave me the biggest hug. And I was back in the day, this is VCR time. He asked me to come back and watch movies with him at night. And I thought, not a physician, but I just touched that kid's life in a positive way. And so there are little things we can do here in clinical research. There's a lot we can do here to help bring things to market faster and more efficiently because there's a lot of people in need.
Thank you for that. What concerns you?
What concerns me is complacency, and especially, and I guess I'm keeping this all healthcare related, but complacency or defense of the status quo. And too many times I look at organizations and large organizations where people just put on their blinders and they just do their job. And it's important to just do your job and get it done. But a lack of curiosity is a problem that causes complacency, and it's really hard to improve. I'm one of the few people. I volunteer. Hey, move my cheese. I want to see how I do. Is Mike Mahoney, he's now CEO of Boston Scientific. I had the pleasure of reporting to him for a while, and he said, "I can drop you in the middle of a jungle with 100 people, and everybody gets out. That's what I know about you." And I like that kind of challenge. I get a lot of people don't, but whatever you're doing, be your best at it. Look for improvement and embrace the change that comes with improvement. Because if you're not improving, what are you doing?
Mm,
It's just sitting there and collecting a paycheck to me, especially in healthcare. It's intolerable. And, there's somebody else at the end of the food stream here that is sick, or somebody's mom or their kids or something else. I going back to this again at GHX, we converted a lot of orders to e-commerce back in the day. And you would think that pacemakers and hips and knees and stents, there'd be a really efficient process for ordering those. Well, most all of that was done via fax. And our job is to take faxes and convert them to electronic commerce. And what we found is like J&J had sophisticated systems to understand how many faxes came to their front door, where it was from, and the big numbers of business, right? These are thousands of dollars for products, but everything goes out FedEx P1 for critical surgery the next day. We stepped in and built what we call GFax, which was convert the fax to EDI and send it through. And what we found by mistake is we didn't have a front door with a doorbell or a camera on it to see who was dialing us. And when it failed, it just failed. And we said, well, I don't know, it rang.
huh,
And in our, from a complacency perspective, I don't know if I've ever been more enraged in my professional career. I looked at my development team and said, guys, do you understand who's on the other side of this?
mm,
We've stepped into a process here where you have someone undergoing cardiac or orthopedic or really heavy surgery tomorrow, and it's life and death. We're not allowed to drop these. If somebody rings the doorbell, you need to know who it is and usher them in and find a way through. This isn't just about technology anymore. This is about people and lives. And so, yeah, so that's the stuff. it doesn't just concern me, it really angers me. And so, the Irish absolutely came up. I may have gotten a visit to make sure, but it was important that people understood how important you're in healthcare and service.
There's a lot of microphone noise there. I don't know what happened.
Oh, I had a very large dog
Uh,
walking around.
okay. That's all right. Um, and what excites you?
You know, what excites me is the opportunity of tomorrow. So, I grew up in and post riots in Detroit. So, everybody talks bad about Detroit. And I was like, there's a land of possibility ahead, and seen the people are amazing and the architecture was amazing, and living on an international border. I just always loved it. And that that's deep in who I am. But when I look at healthcare, I look at the promise of personalized medicine. And, we've got a convergence now of people really being healthcare consumers, and they care about participating in their own care. And then we've got immunotherapies and CAR T cell therapy and gene cell therapy, and then nutrition as a, as a therapeutic. I think there's so many things converging here, eh, that, in the past 5 to 10 years, that what we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 is really, really remarkable. And so, being able to play a part in bringing some of that innovation and really helping people take charge of their healthcare, is very, very exciting to me. And so, I hope I am blessed enough to continue to have that kind of a role. So, yeah, and to I guess outside of that is to continue to work with, amazing people like you. We've gotten to know each other, but the team that
Thank you.
the board has put around me is something else. I do laugh. It's, I used to joke with Bruce Johnson, who's CEO of GHX, and say, hey, you went to Nebraska and I went to Kentucky, and I was like, N isn't for knowledge, K is, but I'm the student that's done remarkably well just through passion, conviction, and determination. And I've got really great critical thinking skills, but probably the best skill I've got is recognizing talent and getting out of the way and letting people go do what they do. And there's some really amazing people, especially, my partners in business and a lot of our clients that, um, they've got a passion to do something and they know how to do it well. And I just love watching other people thrive.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the team that you have is an amazing team. As I've gotten to know, quite a few of the people that are around you, it's great to see the people that are at Validcare and all the great work that you're doing. At Validcare is important as well. I mean, helping to bring, new treatments, around is absolutely critical. So, Patrick McCarthy, thank you so much for being a guest today. We will, of course, have all of your information online for people to get in touch. And thanks a lot for spending time with me.
No, thanks for sharing coffee and getting me up early. So,